Oh man, you guys certainly delivered on all the questions, and I do believe this will result in a very good episode. Just watch. Hey everybody, welcome back to Q&A with AniMat, and on this episode, once again, I have scattered around all around the internet, and especially on social media, where you guys have asked me tons of questions, literally hundreds of questions, and I went out and collect 10 of possibly the best questions that I could find, or probably the ones that I could figure out the best answers for them. But either way, like I said before, it's going to result in a fun-filled and great episode. And we are going to start things off by looking into our first question here, coming from Jeannie Goodson from Facebook. And Jeannie asks me, what's it like being an animation historian, and how does one earn the title? Well, in terms of being an animation historian, I gotta say that, honestly, it's a title that I feel like it is an honor that there are some people out there who would consider me to be an animation historian, or I would be called an animation historian, because animation history has definitely grown to be a massive passion for me. Like, I do love animation overall, but I guess I've pretty much been accustomed to where animation history is kind of like that niche area that has fascinated me the most, to learn about the behind-the-scenes stories about how certain TV shows or how certain movies would end up being made through the art of animation, and hear the unique tales of how specific movies and shows and cartoons and stuff like that end up getting created and how they have developed their own legacy. And in a way, I don't really see myself as an animation historian. I do see myself more as a storyteller, because that's what I like to do with something like Animation Look Back, is that I'm not just dishing out the history of these shows in particular. I like to go and tell stories, because often they can be inspiring, they could send out a message that people can learn from, and that's what I really like about animation history, mainly because, like, not only it taps into another element that I really am fascinated with, which is the story about making movies and stuff like that, and looking into the behind-the-scenes stuff, but especially with the combination of my passion with animation, it does result in me having my biggest fascination, like a combination of things that I love, and it ultimately results into animation history, and that's what I love to look into. And now being considered an animation historian, you know, it honestly feels great. Now, as for earning the title of animation historian, I'm actually gonna go and share a little secret with you all. There's a little bit of a misconception when it comes to not just animation historians, but just historians in general, that you'll realize that it's not as hard to be a historian as much as you think. Because the thing is, people often believe that a historian would be considered a job. It's actually not. It's like what you said, Jeannie. It's actually just a title. Mainly because being a historian of whatever, whether it be about film, about animation, or about American history, or about trains, or whatever, being a historian is not necessarily something that you do as a job. It's actually just a title that you would earn that pretty much legitimizes you into saying that you are a specific person who knows a lot about that kind of history. You have that much knowledge regarding a certain element, which in my case is animation. Now, in order to become a historian, what you have to do is that you gotta take that knowledge and you gotta put it into good use. You gotta go and translate it into something that can be consumed by the public so that they could learn about the knowledge that you know. Case in point, go and take a look at some of the most renowned animation historians, people like Jerry Beck, Leonard Maltin, Charles Solomon, Michael Barrier, Didier Gaze, Jim Cordes, and so much more. You look at all of these guys, like, those are people who are considered as animation historians, some of the greatest examples of animation historians. And yet, their job titles, despite the fact that often when they would be interviewed, they would actually have the title of animation historian, but in terms of their jobs, what they do, it's not necessarily animation historian. What they would do is that they would take their animation historian knowledge and put that into the jobs they actually are working on, as teachers, as journalists, as critics, as authors, and so much more. And in my case, technically, my job isn't being an animation historian. I am technically a YouTuber, mainly because I take my animation history knowledge and I would translate that onto YouTube with the animation look back series. And that really is the secret about being an animation historian, and not just of being an animation historian, but being a historian of whatever you are passionate about, is taking the knowledge that you know in terms of the history of that specific thing that you are passionate about and translate it into something, like really bring that knowledge to life per se. And that would be the secret about being a historian of whatever, or in this case, being an animation historian. So basically, the moral of the lesson here is put that knowledge into good use. Now, the next question that I have here is going to be from Daniela Dahui, and Daniela asks me, have you taken any voice acting lessons or consider taking lessons to improve your craft? Now, before I fully go and answer that question, I'm just gonna say right now that in case you guys don't know, I would love to one day be a full-time voice actor, and that is something that I am pursuing, as well as creating these videos on the internet. And so far it has been going pretty well. I have been getting some gigs and I have been getting some voice acting jobs, and it has been pretty exciting so far. In fact, I actually have my own demos and even my own website where I would go and fully present my demos. So if you guys are curious to know more about my voice acting side, all you have to do is go to mattbrunevo.com. And yes, that is actually a real thing, and you can go and check out my demos there. And if possible, can you please go and share it with many other people, like to make that more known that I'm also trying to be a voice actor? That would actually really help as well. Okay, but anyways, to go back into Daniela's question here, I would actually go and say yes to both. I actually have had a lot of voice acting lessons, whether it be for online or going into special seminars or going into workshops, or I actually did go and just recently I took some voice acting classes as well, and it was very informative, and it actually did teach me a lot about proper voice acting techniques that not only would be good to use for voice acting gigs, but at the same time, it would also be good for my videos as well, to learn about the right techniques and the right things to do in order to go and record my lines for my videos to deliver the best kind of narrations that you would hear, rather it be for stuff like animation look back or for my reviews. And considering to taking lessons to improve my craft, well, that is also something that I would say yes, because the more lessons that you would take, the more classes, the more workshops that you would go and have, the better it would actually be. Like, this is something that's not actually just for beginners and stuff like that. Even if you would technically be considered to have made it in the industry, it is always good to go and attend some workshops in order to go and improve your craft. There's always something that you could learn, even if you are at the top of your game. So it is always important to go and attend some workshops, and I am interested to see what else is there offered, rather it be near my area or whatever could be online. Sometimes they could be a pretty hefty investment, but at the end of the day, they are pretty much worth it. So, that's pretty much my answer that I would say there. Yes, I have taken voice acting lessons, and I would love to go and receive some more in order to fully improve my craft and to fully learn more about how I can fully establish myself as a voice actor to fully be in the industry so that you'll hear my voice a lot more than just in my videos. Alright, so the next question that I have here, again, well, honestly, a good chunk of it will be from Facebook, actually. This one will be from Azran Farouk, and Azran asks me, I know you're not the biggest fan of puns, but would you consider the Muppets and Pokemon examples of good puns? Now, I think it's no secret that, yes, I do not like puns. I do consider them as the lowest forms of comedy, but I will say that there are ways that you can actually make puns work, where there are ways that you can actually make puns funny. And it all requires one piece of knowledge that you have to know about puns. And the truth is, puns are not funny themselves. The biggest mistake that people make with puns is that they think the pun is actually the punchline of it. That is the joke of it all, when in truth, puns are never really that funny. They're more cringy than anything like that. But there are ways that you could take that cringe and actually make that funny, where a pun can be involved in a joke, but it's not really the joke itself. Like, Azron actually did brought up a couple of great examples. Like, take the Muppets, for instance. That is actually one where you would find a lot of puns in there. In fact, the Muppets do provide a good amount of puns. But the thing is that they rarely use those puns as the punchline of it all. Like, take a look at Fozzie. Like, of course, Fozzie, like, his gags are, or his jokes are usually just puns. And let's be honest, they're never really that funny. But the punchline of them, it's not Fozzie's jokes, but rather people's reaction to the jokes. Is seeing how people cringe to Fozzie's gags or how they would react to Fozzie's jokes. And that's why, like, one of the segments in The Muppet Show, whenever you would see Fozzie doing his comedic bits and stuff like that, the humor is not from Fozzie's jokes themselves, but rather it's his interactions with Statler and Waldorf, their reactions to Fozzie's jokes. And that's what makes it all great. That's what makes those puns work with the Muppets. And then you would have Pokemon, for example. Now, Pokemon is more of another story because technically you could say that Pokemon is literally filled with puns. Every single Pokemon name, like, as I am recording this, there's like nearly 1,000, I think almost 900 Pokemon in total, and every single one, their name is actually a pun. But they don't actually use that as a joke. They use that as part of their world building to go and introduce creatures that we have never seen before, creatures that are completely different than the kind that we would have in our own world. So the point of it is never really about the gag. It's not really something that they would look at it and they would say like, oh, that's funny, haha. That's not the case. It's all a part of the world building. It's something that many people don't really consider it as a joke, and they do take it seriously as a legitimate name of that specific creature. So that's basically the thing with puns, is that there are lots of ways that you can put it to good use, especially in humor as well. Rather it be reacting to them or make it a part of the world building. But never, and I mean never, use puns as the punchline, because again, puns are just not funny. Now, the next story that I have here, very interestingly enough, it's not really from social media, but rather someone sent this question to me through my email at animatsreviews@gmail.com. And this is from Gary Preventure. And Gary asks me, how did you find out about Bruno Bozzetto's Allegro Non Tropo? Well, the funny thing with that is that it actually does come with an interesting story, because in the past, I probably have heard about it, but I didn't really think much of it. I thought it would be something that I would never really see it anyways, mainly because, Like, it was probably some hard-to-find foreign animated film, considering that it is an Italian Fantasia parody. And before, that's the most of my knowledge that I know about that movie, and that's pretty much it. And then there was one day that, several years ago, where me and my friends, which you guys probably know as Morgan Ledger from Vaulting, and Jaime Tude, James Sullivan from Pages to Pictures, and sometimes they would go and have special movie nights where we would all get together on Skype or something, and we would all go and watch a specific movie. And they decided one day to go and check out Allegro Non Tropo, and they would go and ask me, "Hey Matt, do you want to check out Allegro Non Tropo?" And the funny thing about that is that they know how to tease me. They know how to, like, you know, poke fun of, like, some of the little quirks that I would have as well. And somehow they would like to go into the dumb guy side of me. Like, they would say, "Hey Matt, come and check out Allegro Non Tropo. It's a Fantasia parody, and it's got boobs in it." And of course, as simultaneously a Disney fan and a dumb guy, like, it immediately goes into my brain by saying, I love Fantasia. I love boobs. I want to check this movie out. And from there, we would all sit together and watch it. And my God, it was one of the best discoveries that I've ever had in terms of an animated film. And it immediately became one of my favorite animated films ever. In fact, I already put it as #1 on my top 10 underrated animated films. And just to quickly summarize what I love about it is that, yes, it is technically a Fantasia parody, especially when it does have that Monty Python style of humor, which, as you could probably tell by one of my posters behind me, I am a huge Monty Python fan, but also, it is an homage to Fantasia, as it does continue the legacy by using the format of Fantasia of taking classical music and blending it with animation, and really good animation. Like, with the designs, I expected maybe, like, television quality animation, but no, Bruno Bozzetto is actually a real legit animator that is able to provide some very good looking and smooth animation. So major props to him on that. And yeah, that's pretty much how I discovered Allegro Non Tropo, and it turned out to be an amazing discovery in terms of animated films. And yes, there are definitely a lot of boobs in it, so that also made me happy as well. Now, the next question that I have here is gonna be from Daniel1234 on YouTube, and Daniel asks me, what are some of the most overrated animated films you've ever seen? Well, I'm gonna be honest, I don't have necessarily a direct answer for that, but what I can say is that this actually does relate to a pet peeve that I would have, where I would immediately consider that movie to be overrated. And it's whenever there would be a new movie that would be released, and there would be people that would immediately hype things up for it. Like, the movie would be fresh out of the oven, it's new in theaters, and people would just go crazy to the point of already calling it one of the greatest animated films of all time, or saying that it's the greatest animated film of all time, which, honestly, whenever I would see those comments, I always find it to be an exaggeration. Even if the movie itself would be great, even if I would find the movie would be very enjoyable, very well made, and very good, calling it immediately the greatest animated film ever, like, already putting it up there as among, like, one of the best, like, up there with Fantasia or Snow White or whatever, I think that's a little too much of an exaggeration, and just, it's kind of like the internet mentality where they immediately want to go and just make things more extravagant than it already is. And the thing that I find so annoying about it is the fact that you never know how things are in the future, especially when it comes to those kinds of movies where, yeah, they would be hyped up at first, but then in the long run, people would just immediately go and forget about it, and you would see far less people calling it one of the best animated films ever. And a great example of this would actually be the Lego Movie. Now, this is not to say that the Lego Movie is not a good film. It is very well made, it is beautifully animated, and the film itself is all around really, really good. But I do recall that when it was freshly released, everybody was really freaking out about it and already placing it as one of the best animated films ever. But then by time, and not really long by time, the position of the Lego Movie really started to get stale real quick, to the point that after several movies being released, people's interest in the Lego Movie quickly stopped, and nowadays, while it is still considered a great animated film, you don't see as much people calling it one of the best animated films in history as much as it was back in 2014. So that would probably be my answer to Daniel's question. It's whenever there are people out there that would immediately say that an animated film is considered the greatest ever just when it was released, because the thing is, you never know how things are going to be in the long run. Yeah, you would say that it's one of the best now, but are you going to say that again in the next few years? And honestly, that is something that I would doubt. Now, the next question that I have here is going to be from Jirei Inja. And chances are I might have mispronounced that name, and if so, I really do apologize. But anyways, Jirei went and asked me, are there any animated movies that you think are saved by their endings? And honestly, that is a pretty tough question, because I don't know if I would say that there are any in which the ending saved the movie per se. Because for the most part, there are a lot of them that, while they do have good endings, the movie itself could be just it's either it's okay, or it could be mediocre or stuff like that. Because it would have a good ending, that doesn't necessarily mean I would think highly of the movie itself. However, I have definitely seen a lot of movies in which the ending is actually the best part of the feature. Now, I don't necessarily mean that, oh, this is kind of like a joke where oh, the best part of this movie is when it ends and the credits would roll. No, it's nothing like that. What I actually mean is the third act of the movie would somehow be way superior than the first two acts, and suddenly the quality of it all just skyrockets, where I suddenly find myself to be completely invested in the feature. And I do have two examples of this that really do come in mind in that case, where the third act or the ending would be the best part of it all. One great example is Monsters University. Now, personally, in my opinion, I feel like it is one of Pixar's weaker films. It just doesn't seem all that great of a movie. Yeah, it's well animated, but it feels more like an unnecessary Pixar sequel that didn't necessarily need to exist. It's the kind that it feels like it's trying to cash in on the success of Monsters, Inc., more so than Pixar genuinely wanting to tell a legitimate good story. But I will say, though, that when the third act appears, after Mike and Sully's team won, and then Mike discovered that the team had to cheat a little bit in order to make him scarier than he actually is, somehow the movie just becomes totally good and somehow takes this brand new direction where Mike has to confront the reality that not even his team have faith in him to believe that he actually is a scary monster. And then we would see the full transition of how the movie would go from Monsters University to Monsters, Inc. Somehow, that third act feels like the most Pixar compared to the first two acts, where it feels like your typical kid-friendly school movie, or your typical kid-friendly college movie, or something like that. So that is one example of a really good ending to a movie that's not really so great. But then there's also another one that I could think of is Paranorman. Now, Paranorman itself is a really good movie, but then suddenly you would get into the third act. And that third act, holy crap, that is probably one of the best moments in any Leica movie out there, when Norman would have to confront the real witch of it all, the one who has cursed the entire town and stuff like that. Somehow, we would just go into unbelievable territories, mind-blowing territories, both visually and in terms of the story itself, where it leads to this really epic conclusion that it's honestly one of the most mind-blowing moments that I've ever seen in a stop-motion animated feature. Not because of like any of the surprise twists that are in there, but also like because of what they were presenting visually, because it really was a blend of so many different mediums. Like you got a little bit of computer, you got a lot of stop motion, you got some hand-drawn in there, but at the same time, even like in terms of the narrative of where the story is leading to, like that really was amazing. Again, Paranorman is a really good movie, but that ending though, holy crap, it really does take the film to a whole new level. So to really answer that question, again, I don't know if there are any that I would say that the ending saved the movie, but there are movies that I've seen in which the ending is the best part of the movie. Now, the next question that I do have here is gonna be from Eden Rahav, and Eden asks me, which Disney park land is your favorite? Each one from one park you have visited. Well, I'm just going to give you some context right now. I have visited 3 theme parks, so I have visited half of the Disney parks that there are around the world, all of which are the non-Asian ones, that being Walt Disney World, Disneyland, and Disneyland Paris. Now, starting off with the one that I have visited the most, Walt Disney World, I would say my favorite among them is actually Disney Hollywood Studios, because as you guys probably know, I have a passion for the art of cinema, and I'm always fascinated about the filmmaking process, whether it be for live action blockbusters or for animated films. So that is something that will always have my heart, and even though technically it is much more different nowadays than it was like back in the 90s, it is always something that always makes me excited to go and check out some of the rides that are featured in there. And so, like, just to be in that Hollywood style environment is just great. And just to go in a theme park that is this massive homage to cinema and the making of movies in general. That, and also, it is the home of my favorite Disney ride of all, Muppet Vision 3D. But then you would also have Disneyland, and I guess I would say, well, my favorite among the two would be Disneyland, because that is the one where it started it all. It's the historical landmark in which is the first Disney theme park, the place where you would find the original Pirates of the Caribbean, the original castle, and just like the original Fantasyland, the original lands, the original Tomorrowland, Adventureland, Frontierland, and so much more. Just the original place where it really did started it all. But then you would also have Disneyland Paris. Now, in that one, some people might expect, because I said Disney Hollywood Studios for Walt Disney World, that I would also say Walt Disney Studios for Disneyland Paris. Not exactly. Keep in mind that the only time that I went to Disneyland Paris as of this recording is back when I was like 14 or 15 years old. I was there in 2007. So with that context, keep in mind that at the time, Walt Disney Studios was almost empty per se. It was only like a fraction of Disney Hollywood Studios, and back then, the only new major attraction that everybody wanted to go was on the Crush Coaster, which was a small roller coaster themed to Finding Nemo. And yeah, there are some interesting things that they also got there that is also like Hollywood Studios, like they had their backlot tour at one point, but other than that, that was pretty much it. Like, it really was a small place where it only took part of my day that I wanted to do everything that I wanted to do in there. So I guess with that said, my answer for that one would have to be, well, the main area, Disneyland Paris. Especially when there are some really fascinating rides that would be considered like significant upgrades, or they are unique compared to their American counterparts, like Pirates of the Caribbean, or having their own unique Tomorrowland is actually really cool. So there is that. There is really that unique factor that does give Disneyland Paris its own voice. So, and that, and also underneath the castle, there is this giant animatronic dragon that's that's really awesome. So that was also a highlight during my trip there. So I guess that would be my answer to all of that. So basically, in short, Disney Hollywood Studios at Disney World, Disneyland in Disneyland Resort, and Disneyland Paris in Disneyland Paris Resort. Now, the next question that I have here is going to be from Daniel P. Weber, and Daniel asks me, which YouTuber would you most want to do a collaborative video or review with, and why? Well, if I would have to narrow it down to one YouTuber to do a collab with that I would love to do, and keep in mind, there are plenty that I would love to do, and there are some that I had the honor to actually do so, at least for my podcast. People like Saberspark, Pan Pizza, Pie Guy Rules, and many more. But if there is one that I would love to do a collaborate, someone whom I would consider to be a fan for many years, it would definitely be the guys at Double Toasted, like Corey Coleman and Martin Thomas. I have been a fan of them ever since their days of Spill.com, and I have been following them ever since, and even to this day, I love listening to their reviews, I love listening to their takes of recent news and stuff like that, because they are both very informative and hilarious at the same time, and in a way, I kind of view them a little bit as role models of who I want to be as a YouTuber, to be both informative, entertaining, and funny at the same time, while staying true to myself, and something that I want to try to do, and to put that element upon both the videos that I do on my main channel and also with my podcast on AniMat's Crazy Cartoon Cast. So that would be one that I would love to do in the future. I would love to do a collab with Corey, Martin, and the gang for Double Toasted, or have them appear like in my videos or for my podcast. So that would definitely be one I would love to do a collab with, if I would have to pick one, because again, there are plenty of people that I would love to do a collab with, and I would love to do a collab with them again, and there are some others as well that would be among my wish list, like like James Rolfe, or Black Nerd Comedy with Andre the Black Nerd, basically, or Ked Icarus. But like, my number one on that list would definitely have to be Double Toasted. Now, the next question that I have is going to be from Jeff Hughes, and for this one, Jeff asks me, so I notice in your parts of AL, since Animation Look Back Ralph Bakshi, you began with a short intro before getting to the subject, and then end with a short clip as a joke, foreshadowing, or just a fun reminder. What influenced your decision for this new format for current AL? Well, for some of them, it doesn't necessarily specify for just Animation Look Back, but it also would go onto a lot of my other videos as well, including my reviews. Now, in terms of the intros that I would do, in terms of like appearing on camera and starting off with a little short story before getting into the meat of it all, that one I actually was inspired by Walt Disney himself. This was actually something that I started way back with Animation Look Back, The Best of Stop Motion, and I was inspired by Walt Disney with his introductions that he would do with The Wonderful World of Color, or with his Disneyland TV show, because there really is that charm that Walt would put onto his intros, or whenever you would see him on camera, when he would appear as what many people know him as, Uncle Walt. So that's where I would get my idea and try to channel that a little bit, where I would integrate my personality with Animation Look Back. So that's where I got my inspiration for that, and it was a really fun novelty that I decided to continue on with it, and I think it really did help a lot with Animation Look Back. So I think it really is a nice little add-on to the show. And as for the ending bit, like that little ending clip, I decided I wanted to do, I don't know when I've officially started those. I think I started that with Animation Look Back Studio Ghibli, but I'm not 100% sure on that. And I don't necessarily do them all the time, but at least with my main videos I would do that. But I mainly decided to do that as like a little fun post-credit thing. I wanted to add something like a little tidbit Like, a little treat for sticking around after the credits and stuff like that. And sometimes they would be, like, foreshadowing what's gonna be, like, in the next part of Animation Look Back. Or they would also go and just do like a little gag, just like a little joke that would reflect on the video itself, or just like a random thing that would happen in the subject that I would talk about. It's just like a fun little tidbit. Again, it's a post-credit thing. It's more like a little treat to reward people if you decide to go and stick around after the credits, because there is a little bit more. So that's basically the answer for both of those. It's just like little add-ons to really spice things up to make the videos a little better than if they would just be on their own. Alright, so now we're gonna finish this off with one more question, and that honor shall go to Tristan Mitchells. And Tristan asks me, what makes animation so special to you? Well, to be honest, there could be many factors as to why animation is just really special to me, especially the fact that I am someone who has grown up with animation all my life. But if there is one thing that really makes animation stand out to me, that makes it feel so special than anything else, than anything in the entertainment medium, it really is the factor of art coming to life. Just creating a drawing or creating a little art piece of your own and seeing that come to life. I think there's just something beautiful about it. Like, have you ever looked at a drawing? Have you ever looked at a painting? Or have you ever looked at an art piece and you wonder what would happen if that art piece would suddenly come to life? If it ends up having a personality of its own, or whatever stories they would depict, that they would come to life in front of your eyes. That's what animation is. You see someone's artistic talent be put to good use, and seeing that just come to life in order to go and tell stories, to deliver messages, to really make an impact on people, where cartoon characters can legitimately count as personal heroes for someone, or for some people out there, that those art pieces can come to life and actually make an impact in the real world. I think that's the true beauty of it all, that someone can take their artistic voice and not just go and make a simple art piece, not just to go and make an image, but to take that image and to bring that to life. I think that's what makes animation so special. It's really, it's an art piece that's just brought to a brand new level. It's art that's literally coming to life before your very eyes. And that is pretty much it for this episode of Q&A with AniMat. So I would like to go and give a major thanks to everyone who has asked me a question for this episode. And if you would like to go and have your question be answered here in Q&A with AniMat, then all you have to do is just go and ask me. Rather it be on social media, in the comments section, or sending me an email. If you have a really good question that you would like me to go and answer, please specify that it is for Q&A with AniMat, and chances are maybe your question would actually end up getting answered by me. So with all that said and done, I would like to say thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, see you later, dudes!